This is my pet, his name is Stitch, and he's my best friend. Hey guys, Tez here and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking you through the 6 top tips I have for your Band 6 pharmacist interviews. So before we get started, get a cup of tea, get your notepad, some pen and paper and sit down and enjoy. Also, please subscribe if you haven't already because it really helps me out. So the first tip is for you to remember that interviews are for you to prove that you match who you say you are on paper. If they didn't want you, then you wouldn't be interviewing, so just remember to be yourself, be confident and do whatever it is you need to do to get yourself ready for the interview. Now you might be thinking, oh, I've done a community pre-reg, therefore I don't have much experience in hospital, but they wouldn't have invited you to the interview if they didn't think you had the capable skills. Now I know sometimes you might think you don't have as much clinical knowledge, but clinical knowledge is always something you can learn. There's guidelines that you can follow and there's other pharmacists you can ask for help from. They would much rather you be the type of person they want in terms of personality than to have all the clinical knowledge in the world and still not be the type of person that would get on with that team. So for example, somebody who's caring, who puts patients first, and you might be that type of person, so you just need to make sure that you highlight the skills that you do have and just be confident. You got this. I know that's right. So the second thing is the trust. Make sure you know what kind of trust you're applying for, the values that they hold dear and what their plans are for the future. For example, my trust is planning on building a new children's hospital, and because I really like working in peds, I could say I'm looking forward to working in a trust that focuses on children and their conditions, and you feel like there'll be lots of opportunities for career progression if it's a specialist centre for kids, for example. Also look at their values. Like if they want to be fair, then you can say how maybe you stood up for your colleague who you thought was being treated unfairly because you believe that everyone should be treated fairly, stuff like that. That can help prove that you know what kind of trust you're going into and you're well prepared for that job. This is like a, I guess, to be. I like to structure the answers that I give by using the STAR acronym, which is situation, task, action and result. So the situation will be what the interviewer asks you. So they might ask you to describe a time where you were in a conflict and you had to resolve it, or how you resolved it. So the task could be, for example, a patient comes in to collect their methadone prescription and there's a queue, but that patient is quite impatient and they don't want to wait. So then that then creates a conflict. So the action could be what steps you took. Now these might include talking to the patient even and asking them to wait and explaining that it's quite busy in the pharmacy. And now this might not always work, so you could say you had to get maybe your tutor or the pharmacy manager to come in and speak to the patient. Now this might seem like it's not a positive example because you weren't able to resolve the conflict by yourself, but you assessed the situation and you realized that you needed help, so you got help from your colleague or your supervisor, and the result was that the patient then calmed down and they waited. And a way to then spin this to make it seem like you learn from your mistakes or you learn from the experiences that you're subjected to, you could say, looking at that situation, maybe you should never have approached that patient in the first place and got your manager to deal with the situation from the get-go. Or you can say you learned something by the way that the manager spoke to the patient, which you think you're going to use next time or if that happens again. I think they just want to see how you sort of learn from your mistakes and whether you adapt and whether you're reflective on your practice. So you don't necessarily have to say, oh, a car was coming through and then I stopped it with my bare hands and everyone was saved and I saved the day and I'm the hero. Sometimes it just doesn't work like that because conflict sometimes doesn't happen in the workplace. So it's just finding examples where you may think you don't have a positive outcome but just spin it to make it positive. Yeah. So point 3 is you need to go over the job spec and person specification that comes with the job and make sure you tailor your answers according to that. So as you go through the job spec, you notice that there'll be a table that sort of tells you how they'll assess you. So they'll assess that you have an MPharm degree by looking at the application, but they might say good analytical skills, and then that will be assessed at the interview. So already you know that it's good for you to have an example of how you can ensure that you have good analytical skills, which you can get from part of the audit. If you've done an audit, or if you're in the process of doing the audit, you have to analyze the data from that, and you can talk about how you've analyzed the data from the audit and what skills it's taught you and how you're going to be more analytical in the future. They might ask about good communication, which sometimes just the way that you speak will help them. So if you're calm, if you're measured with your answers, don't cry, just be professional. Remember that at the end of the day, this is a job interview and they want to hire you. Moving on to point number 4, you need to know how that trust runs their training program. So whether it means you need to find other foundation pharmacists who currently work there, you need to know whether each year they hire 5 or 20 people, you need to know whether the diploma is part of that training, you need to know whether that diploma is self-funded or whether they'll pay for you. You also need to know whether they're going to ask you for a fee if your circumstances change, for example, before you've completed the course, because different trusts do different things. I think some trusts, as part of the diploma, the study days are on a weekend so that it doesn't impede on your work time. So the diploma might be free, but then you might then have to stay for 2 years after you've completed it at that trust, and maybe if you have to leave before 2 years are up, then they charge you a penalty. If you think about it, the diploma is 2 years, and let's say best case scenario, you start the diploma straight after getting your PIN, so you start it in September after getting your job in August, and then you do that for 2 years, and then you have to stay for 2 years. That's potentially 2016 till 2020 where you cannot move to a different trust, and that might affect you if you're planning on buying a house, moving, you know, circumstances change. You never know what the future holds. I feel like if this year has taught us anything, is that you never know what the future holds. Also, you need to know whether they run an on-call program, whether you'll be expected to be on call from home, whether you're expected to be on call from the hospital, whether you do that once a month or once a week, like what their program is like. I believe that we should work so we can live the lives that we want, not live to work, if that makes sense. And also you need to think about how working full-time and doing the diploma will affect you, because I feel like going to uni and studying full-time is completely different than working full-time and having to do the diploma on top. So even if it's free, you'll find that you have to use a lot of your own personal time to sort of complete assignments and all these things. So just make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. So tip number 5 is to read up on some pharmacy news. So you want to ensure that you're you follow the current times and you know how the profession is progressing, or you know what news is out there that might impact you on a day-to-day basis. So an example of that is some time ago Priadol was going to stop supplying medicines to the UK. Now if you don't know what Priadol is, it's the brand name for lithium, which is used for people who have bipolar. So most of the patients in the UK use Priadol, it's sort of first line treatment, and having its import into the country being stopped would have a huge impact on a lot of patients and how they manage their condition. So you could take that piece of news, for example, and say how that would affect your current practice would be, let's say someone new is diagnosed with bipolar, then you would suggest starting them on an alternative brand, which is, I searched it up once when I thought this was going to be an issue. So stuff like that just shows that you care about the profession and you care about your patients, and you're always looking out for news that might impact your everyday working, I guess. So last but not least, ask a question. Don't ask about money, for example. Like, don't say, oh, how much am I going to get paid? Probably you're going to get, if it's an NHS job, then you kind of already know how much you're going to get paid, so don't ask questions like that. You might want to ask questions about, what does the ideal candidate for this job look like to you, for example. You might ask whether there's career progression opportunities after the diploma, what percentage of the foundation pharmacists tend on to stay and progress to specialised trainee pharmacists. If you can find people who already work there who are doing that role that you want to do, it's always a bonus, because they can sort of tell you what they go through day by day. That will make you stand out, for example, from someone who might not have done that. So sometimes you might not have as much experience, but what you do to flesh out your application could be what ends up getting you the job over somebody who sort of has all the clinical experience, but they just banking on that to get the job. So I hope you found this informative, and I hope you learned some tips, and good luck with your interviews, and hopefully you get the job that you want. So the book of the video is My Sister the Serial Killer. If the title doesn't spoil it for you, it's basically about a sister who is a serial killer. Boo. The book follows their journey, and it sort of makes you question how sort of relationships that you have with your family impact your life, and whether blood is thicker than water. And girl, you got to read it. It's sort of like a dark humor thriller type of book, so it's definitely a page turner. I hope you enjoy the book if you read it. Anyways, let me know in the comments if you enjoyed the video, or if there's any other types of videos you want me to do. Tap that like button so the video reaches more people. Subscribe if you haven't already, because it really helps me out. And until next time, bye for now.